The morning room at Ashcroft Park was very quiet the first time Lady Viola Pembridge sat in it alone. And she noticed the quiet the way a person notices something they have been denied for a long time. With a small, careful attention, as though it might not last. The tea in her cup was the right temperature. The light through the tall windows was the particular pale gold of early autumn, the kind that makes a room look warmer than it is. And outside on the gravel drive, two men were loading something onto a cart without speaking. Viola watched them for a moment, then looked at her cup. She was 29 years old, and she had been managing things for 13 years. And she knew, in the clear and practical way she knew most things, exactly what this room was, and exactly what she was doing in it. She was being considered. She had considered herself in return. The numbers were not good at Pembridge. Georgiana's school fees were not small. And a woman who had held a dying estate together since the age of 16 had, at minimum, a steady disposition. That was what the Duke of Ashcroft required. She had read the letter twice and understood it completely. She set her cup down, folded her hands, and waited. The Dowager Duchess Harriet did not come at the appointed hour. She came 10 minutes early, and she did not sit. She crossed the room directly, past the sofa, past the writing desk, past the small table where Viola's cup was cooling, and stopped close enough that Viola could see the careful arrangement of her expression, composed on the surface and underneath the composure, something urgent and not entirely steady. Harriet was a woman of 60 who had managed a great house for 40 years and had the bearing to show it. But her hands, Viola noticed, were pressed flat against her skirts. "You will forgive me," the Dowager said, "for not sitting. What I have to say is better said standing." Viola looked up at her and said nothing. "My son is good," Harriet said. "I want you to understand that first. He is kind, and he is good, and he has been, for 3 years, sealed shut in a way that I cannot open from the outside. He will not believe anything that does not arrive already proven. He has reasons for this that I will not explain now, but they are real reasons, and they cost him something real." She paused. "I am asking you to pretend you love him. Give the performance long enough for the truth to catch up. I believe it will." The room held the quiet. Outside, the cart moved off down the drive. Viola set her cup down without sound. The cup did not tremble. She held the Dowager's gaze for a long moment, not a challenging look, not a cold one, but the particular look of a woman who is reading something very carefully before she agrees to sign it. "Tell me," Viola said, "what you are actually asking me to do." The Dowager blinked. It was, Viola thought, not the response she had prepared for. "I have told you," Harriet said. "You have told me the outcome you want," Viola said. "I am asking about the method. You want me to perform an emotion I do not have. In front of a man you describe as someone who cannot be deceived, in hopes that the performance will eventually become true. Those are 3 separate problems, and I would like to understand which of them you have actually solved." Harriet was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, she sat down. "He will not be looking for deception," she said. "He is not suspicious. He is careful. There is a difference. He will be watching for sincerity, and sincerity is not the same as love. Be sincere. Be genuinely attentive. Be yourself, Lady Pembridge, only be yourself in a room where you have decided to stay." Viola considered this. She looked at her cup. "And if the truth does not catch up?" she asked. "Then you will have had a comfortable winter at Ashcroft and a settlement that secures your sister's future, and we will dissolve the arrangement quietly in the spring. the dowager said. I am not asking you to sacrifice yourself. I am asking you to give him the time that he would never give himself. Why me? Viola asked. You said he has refused 3 matches in 5 years. Why would this one be different? Harriet looked at her hands for a moment. Because I believe he has already made his choice, she said. He simply does not know it yet. It was not a complete answer. Viola recognized this clearly. She also recognized that pressing further would yield only more careful omissions, and that the dowager was not going to explain herself any further in this room on this morning. Whatever the full truth was, it was being held back. Not from cruelty, Viola thought, but from a calculation that the full truth, offered too early, would close the door before it had a chance to open. She stood. She smoothed her dress. She picked up her cup and drank the last of the tea, which had gone slightly cool, and set the cup back on its saucer with a sound so small it barely registered. I will meet him this afternoon, she said. We will see what we see. The dowager looked at her with something that was not quite relief and not quite gratitude. Something more complicated than either, and more private. Thank you, she said. I have not agreed to anything yet, Viola said pleasantly, and went to find her gloves. The drawing room that afternoon was arranged with the careful neutrality of a room that does not wish to suggest anything. Edmund Vane, Duke of Ashcroft, was standing near the window when Viola entered, and he turned when she came in with the particular quality of attention of a man who has spent a long time being observed and has learned to be very still under it. He was taller than she had expected. His face was not unkind. It was, she thought, the face of a man who had decided at some point that he would not let his face tell people things he had not chosen to tell them himself. He crossed the room and offered his hand to assist her from her chair, which she had not yet sat in. So the gesture arrived slightly early, and she took it anyway because to point this out would have been unkind. He was gloved, and she was gloved, and through 2 layers of good leather, she felt the warmth of his grip. He held it 1 moment longer than required. She did not think it was intention. She thought it was surprise. The simple, unguarded surprise of a man who had not expected warmth from that direction, and had not moved quickly enough to conceal the fact that he noticed it. She filed this away and said nothing about it. They sat. The conversation moved through the expected channels with the expected precision. The estate, the county, the weather as it pertained to the harvest. Edmund asked her questions that were polite and not intrusive, and she answered them with warmth that was genuine in its manner, even when it was careful in its content. She watched him. He was not performing, or rather, he was performing. But his performance was silence and steadiness. And it had been practiced so long it had become indistinguishable from his actual character. She understood this because she had done the same thing herself. Once, during a pause, he looked out the window for a moment and then said, without particular emphasis, "The library is the warmest room in the house in October, in case you find yourself here past September." It was not a declaration. It was a piece of practical information, offered in the same tone a person might use to mention that the east staircase was faster. But she noted it, and she noted that he had offered it, and she moved on. The visit lasted 2 hours. She performed through the whole of it, warm without forward, attentive without eager. And when she left, she was fairly certain she had done it well. That night, in the small room at the inn where she was staying before the formal arrangements were settled, she sat in the dark for 20 minutes and did not think about anything in particular. She was not distressed. She was not hopeful. She was doing what she always did when she had made a decision she could not yet fully see the shape of. She sat with it and let it settle. Then she lit the candle and wrote to Georgiana. She wrote, "I have accepted. Do not ask me why yet." She sealed it, set it aside, and went to sleep. The betrothal appeared in the county notices within the week, a small, formal paragraph, the kind that announces conclusions rather than stories. Viola read it over breakfast, noted that it was accurate, and set the paper aside. 3 days later, she arrived at Ashcroft Park with 2 trunks, a leather case of correspondence, and the clear-eyed understanding that she had 3 months to manage what the Dowager had asked of her. She had prepared carefully. She knew what to wear and when, how to be observed in a room, how to move through a great house as though she belonged in it without suggesting that she was trying to belong in it. She had prepared for requirements. She had prepared for the social architecture of a ducal household, the hierarchy of the staff, the rhythms of the week, the particular expectations of a woman in her position. She had not prepared for curiosity. The first time Edmund asked her what she was reading, she looked up from her book and found him standing in the doorway of the morning room with the expression of a man who has asked a question because he actually wanted to know the answer. "Cowper," she said. "Do you like him?" Edmund asked. She considered this. "I find him honest," she said. "He does not dress his sadness up." Edmund nodded slowly, as though this were information he was filing away. "I find him difficult to finish," he said. "Not because he is sad, because he is accurate." He paused. "There is a difference." He left before she could respond, and she sat for a moment looking at the doorway where he had been. The following Sunday he asked her, on the walk back from church, what she had made of the sermon. "I thought the vicar was arguing against the thing he meant to argue for," she said. "He set out to comfort and ended by making the loss sound more final than grief usually does." Edmund was quiet for 3 paces. "Yes," he said. "I thought so too." He asked her the week after whether the house was too large for one person. She looked at him. He was watching the grounds, not her face, which she thought was deliberate. "I think," she said carefully, "that a house this size requires either a great many people or a person who has decided very firmly what they are for. Otherwise the rooms become questions." He turned and looked at her then, directly, for the first time since the drawing room. He said, "Yes," and the word carried the weight of something longer that he had decided not to say. She walked back to the house and stood in the entrance hall for a moment before she went upstairs. And she recognized, with the clarity she applied to most things, that she had not prepared for this at all. October arrived with frost on the lower windows and the particular amber light that makes every afternoon feel like the last afternoon before something changes. The library at Ashcroft Park faced west, and in the evenings the light came through the tall shelves and long horizontal bars that moved slowly across the spines of the books and then were gone. Viola had begun spending her evenings there. The Dowager watched her at dinner and at the occasional morning calls, and, Viola knew, approved of what she saw. The performance was holding. She was warm without forward, attentive without eager, present without demanding. She answered Edmund's questions with the careful warmth of a woman who is interested, but not urgent. And she managed the precise emotional temperature that the situation required. What she had not accounted for was that managing the temperature required her to be present. And being present in the library in October meant that Edmund asked her what she thought rather than what she needed. And that was a different question entirely. A question about needs she could manage. A question about thoughts required her actual thoughts. And actual thoughts were more expensive to manufacture than performed warmth. And she was already spending everything she had on the performance itself. So she started answering honestly. It was a practical decision. "I think the argument in the third chapter fails," she said one evening, about a volume of political economy he had mentioned. "Not because the logic is wrong, but because the logic assumes a starting condition that does not exist. He is solving a problem from a position that no one actually occupies." Edmund looked at her from across the desk. "You have read Malthus?" he said. "I have managed an estate on insufficient income for 13 years, she said. "I have read everyone who had an opinion about insufficient income." There was a pause, then something moved through his expression. Not a smile, exactly, but the structural precondition of one. "That," he said, "is the most useful qualification I have heard offered for an opinion on political economy." She looked down at her book to conceal the fact that she was pleased. The second intimacy arrived without announcement, as the real ones usually do. She had reached for a volume on the upper shelf, something she wanted for a reference, something she could have waited until morning to retrieve with the step stool. And she had stretched for it and not quite reached it. And Edmund had crossed the room without hurrying and taken it down. He placed it in her hands. His hand steadied the spine of the book, and for one moment only, his fingers were at her wrist, steadying that too, before he stepped back. He said nothing. She said nothing. She opened the book and found her page. But she was aware, with a precision she found inconvenient, of exactly where his fingers had been. The third intimacy came in the gallery, on an evening when they had walked through it after dinner because the dowager had gone to bed early, and the alternative was sitting in separate rooms. The gallery was not heated in the evenings. Viola had not thought to bring a shawl, and she did not shiver, obviously. She was not a woman who shivered, obviously. But apparently she shivered enough. Edmund removed his coat without ceremony and placed it over her shoulders. "You will be cold," she said. "I have not yet learned to feel the cold," he said, and walked on ahead to look at a portrait near the far window. She stood for a moment with his coat on her shoulders. It was warm, warmer than she expected, or warmer than she had expected to feel it, and it smelled of cedar and something she could not name. She walked on and stood beside him in front of the portrait, which was of a man with his hands behind his back and an expression of great patience, and she did not say anything about the coat, and neither did he. She had stopped preparing for his questions sometime around the third week of October. She had not decided to stop. She had simply noticed one evening that she was not doing it anymore. Georgiana's letter arrived on a Thursday morning, addressed to Edmund in care of the house, in Georgiana's unmistakable handwriting. Large and slightly tilted, the handwriting of a girl who had been told to write more carefully and had never quite managed it. Viola saw it on the hall table when she came down from her room, and her first thought was calm, and her second thought was not. She did not touch it. She went to breakfast. She ate without tasting anything, and told herself it was possible the letter was about something else entirely, which she did not believe. That afternoon, Edmund came to the library. He set the letter on the desk between them. He did not sit. He looked at her for a moment with a particular quality of stillness that was his natural register. And then he said, "This arrived this morning. I have not opened it. Whatever it contains is yours. I have no wish to know anything you have not chosen to tell me yourself." Viola looked at the letter. She looked at his hands, which were very still on the edge of the desk. She reached across and took his hand. Briefly, one moment, her fingers over his, before she picked up the letter. He did not move. He did not speak. He waited until she had it in her hand, and then he said, I will leave you to it," and left. She sat alone in the library with the letter for a long time before she opened it. When she did, she read it through twice. Then she held it near the candle until it caught, and she set it in the grate and watched it burn to nothing. And she sat in the chair until the clock on the mantel said 2 in the morning. Georgiana had meant well. She was certain of that. Georgiana had always meant well, had always believed that truth was a gift rather than a weapon, had always trusted that honesty offered in love would be received in love. She was 19, she had been at school for 3 years, and she had not yet learned that the world does not always receive gifts the way they are intended. She had written to Edmund because she was worried about Viola. She had explained the arrangement. She had explained the performance. She had explained, in her large, tilted handwriting, that her sister was the best person she knew, and that she deserved better than a pretense, and that she hoped Edmund was the kind of man who would understand. He had brought the letter back, unopened. Viola sat in the dark until dawn, deciding what that meant. Lord Ashby arrived at Ashcroft Park in the 3rd week of November, under the auspices of a sporting visit to a neighboring estate, which fooled no one. He was 38, pleasant in the specific way of men who have learned that pleasantness is useful. And he had been watching the match between Viola and Edmund with the professional attention of a man who sees an opportunity in other people's arrangements. He found Viola in the long gallery on a Tuesday afternoon, which was not an accident. "Lady Pembridge," he said, falling into step beside her with the ease of a man who had never in his life been unwelcome anywhere. What a fortunate coincidence. "Lord Ashby," she said, and kept walking. "I have been meaning to speak with you," he said. "Privately, as it happens. I find I have come into some information that concerns you rather directly." She stopped. She turned to look at him. "I know the arrangement was manufactured," he said pleasantly. "I know the terms. I know the dowager's role in it. And I know your compliance was, shall we say, practical rather than passionate." He smiled. "I intend to tell Edmund, of course, unless you find you would prefer to consider a different arrangement. My own situation is quite comfortable, and my mother does not whisper requests to women she has never met." The gallery was long and cold and empty. The portraits on the walls looked down with the uniform indifference of people who have seen worse. Viola did not move. She looked at him with the quiet precision that had been her whole life's armor, and she let the silence sit between them long enough that he shifted slightly before she spoke. "Let me ask you something," she said. "You have described a man, Edmund Vane, as someone whose trust can be managed by whoever gets to him first with a piece of information. Is that your actual understanding of him?" Ashby's smile remained. "I think he is a man who values honesty." "Then you have answered my question," she said. "A man who values honesty would prefer the truth from any direction to the silence of a coward. If you have information that is true, tell him. He will hear it. He will think about it. And then he will make his own determination, because that is what he does." She paused. "What he will not do is thank you for it. Lady Pembridge, I have been performing composure for 15 years, she said, and her voice was very even. I have been managing rooms and conversations and situations that required me to be steady when I was not, to be warm when I was cold, to be certain when I had nothing certain to stand on. I know what I'm doing when I perform." She looked at him directly. "What I'm doing now is not performing." She walked past him. She was 3 steps beyond him when she understood, with a clarity that arrived like cold water, that she had meant it. Not as a tactic, not as the line that ended the conversation, though it had done that too. She had meant it. She had said it because it was true. And the truth of it had been sitting in her somewhere since October. Since the library, since the coat, since the moment she stopped preparing for his questions. And she had not named it until she said it aloud to a man who deserved it least. She walked the length of the gallery and did not look back. The dowager came to Viola's room that evening. She did not send a maid ahead. She came herself, which told Viola before the door had fully opened that whatever was coming was not a small thing. "Sit down," Viola said, because the dowager looked as though she needed to. Harriet sat. She folded her hands in her lap, the same gesture as the morning room, Viola noticed. The hands pressed flat as though holding something down. And then she looked up. 2 years ago, she said, there was a garden party at Melfield. You were there. I know you were there because I was watching from the upstairs window of the east wing, and I saw you standing near the rose garden in the late afternoon, and I saw a man walk away. Viola went very still. The man was Edmund, Harriet said. He was not meant to be there. He had come to speak to Melfield about a drainage matter, and the party was already in progress, and he stayed longer than he intended. I watched him from the window. I watched him see you. And I watched him leave. She paused. He had been told, by someone at the party, incorrectly as it turned out, that you were promised to another man. He left because he believed there was nothing to stay for. The fire in the grate made a small sound. Outside, the wind had come up. You arranged this match, Viola said. Not because the numbers suited, not because I was steady and manageable, because you watched him walk away from a garden party 2 years ago and you decided to repair it. Yes, Harriet said. The whisper, Viola said. The pretend. That was not for me. She stopped. You thought he would need more time than I would. You thought I was the one who would arrive ready, and he was the one who needed the pretense to have space to become real. I thought, Harriet said carefully, that he would not come to you of his own motion, that he would not let himself. He has reasons for that which I should have told you from the beginning, and I did not, because I was afraid you would not agree to come. Tell me now, Viola said. So Harriet told her about the woman Edmund had chosen himself, against his mother's preference, against the family's expectation, and about the engagement, and about the 18 months, and about the morning in London when the letter arrived, and he was already too far away to be there in time. She told it plainly, without embellishment, in the way of a woman who has carried a fact for a long time, and knows that dressing it up would be a disrespect to the weight of it. Viola listened. She did not interrupt. When it was done, she sat for a moment with the full shape of it. He blames himself, she said. He has never said so, Harriet said. That is how I know. Viola looked at the fire. I need you to leave, she said, not unkindly. I need to think. She did not come down to dinner. She sat in her room and thought. With the clear-eyed precision she applied to everything, about what she had been given and what it cost and what it meant. She thought about the library and the letter returned unopened and the coat placed over her shoulders without ceremony. She thought about what she had said to Ashby in the gallery and the fact that she had meant it. At 10 o'clock she descended to the library. The fire was lit. The tea was on the tray. Edmund was not there. But the fire was his doing, and the tea was his doing. And the room was warm. And she sat down in the chair nearest the hearth and poured a cup and held it in both hands and understood. In the clear and practical way she understood most things, that she was in very serious trouble. Ashby, having failed with Viola directly, wrote to Edmund 3 days later. The letter was not manufactured scandal. He was cleverer than that. It was a pointed suggestion, phrased as friendly concern, that the arrangement had the appearance of a business transaction dressed as courtship, and that Edmund, as a man who valued honesty, might find it worth his while to investigate what had been done on his behalf. Edmund read it once. He went to his mother. Harriet told him everything. The whisper, the pretend, Viola's compliance, the garden party, and what she had watched from the window, and why she had arranged the match. She told him in the same plain way she had told Viola, without embellishment, without apology, with the weariness of a woman who has been managing the truth for too long and is relieved to put it down. Edmund listened. He did not interrupt. When she was finished, he stood for a moment, and then he left the room. He did not come to dinner. He did not come to the library. For 3 days he was present in the house. She saw him at a distance twice, heard him once in conversation with the estate secretary. But he did not come to her, and she did not go to him, because she understood, with the accuracy she applied to people as well as to problems, that he needed the silence and that interrupting it would be a mistake. On the evening of the second day, she found on the desk in her room a small arrangement of late-season flowers from the kitchen garden. Nothing grand, the kind of thing a housekeeper might do at a guest's request. She did not know if it was from him. She thought it was. On the morning of the third day, she learned, from the housekeeper's mention of a letter being drafted in the study, that Edmund had written something that had not yet been sent. She did not ask what it said. She already knew. December came to Ashcroft Park on a morning of hard frost and white sky, and the entrance hall was cold with it. The great doors had been opened to admit 2 tenants who had come about a matter of fencing on the north boundary, and the estate secretary was already present at his small table near the window. And the housekeeper had come through on her way to the kitchen and stopped when she saw Viola coming down the stairs. Viola had not planned what she was going to say. She had, for the first time in 13 years, decided not to plan. Edmund was standing near the fireplace, with his back half turned, reading something. He heard her step and turned, and she saw in his face the particular expression of a man who has spent 3 days building a wall and is not certain it will hold. She stopped on the bottom step. The estate secretary looked up. The housekeeper did not move. The 2 tenants, who had been waiting with the patience of men accustomed to waiting, looked at her with the polite blankness of people who know they are witnessing something that is not their business and are not yet sure whether to leave. "I know about the letter," she said. "I am not here to ask you not to send it. That is your decision, and I will not manage it." Edmund said nothing. He held the papers in his hand. "I did not know what love was," she said. "I want you to understand that clearly, because I have been precise about most things, and I want to be precise about this. I was not withholding it. I did not have it to withhold. I came here with a practical understanding of what this arrangement was and a clear intention to manage it, as well as I manage everything else." She stopped. "Somewhere between the pretending and the autumn and the library, and the way you brought that letter back without opening it. Somewhere in all of that, I stopped pretending." The entrance hall was very quiet. The fire in the grate made small sounds. "I am not asking you to believe me," she said. "I know what the arrangement was. I know what the Dowager asked me to do. I know that you have every reason to look at the past 4 months and see a performance and nothing more. And I cannot argue you out of that, because the performance was real. I performed it. I chose it. It was deliberate. She met his eyes. What I am telling you is that it stopped being deliberate. I cannot tell you the exact moment. I know that it did. She had no composure left. She had spent it all, on 13 years of holding things together, on the morning room and the autumn and the library evenings, and she had nothing left to put between herself and the things she was saying. Truth is the only thing I still own, she said. I am giving you what I own. The silence lasted long enough that the estate secretary looked down at his papers, and the housekeeper found something to examine on the floor. The two tenants had the good grace to look at the door. Then Edmund said very quietly, "Tell me about a garden party, 2 years ago at Melfield, an evening in late summer." She looked at him. "A man you saw leave," he said. "The way he walked." She was still for a moment. Then she said, "He walked as though he had decided something that cost him something, and had decided not to let the cost show. I noticed him because I recognized the way of it. I do the same thing myself." Edmund set the papers on the mantel. He looked at her for a long moment. The long moment that was his only rhythm when what he felt had become unavoidable. "I walked away," he said, "because I was told you were promised to another man. I thought about it afterward, more than I should have, for a woman I had seen once across a garden." He paused. "I did not know who you were. I did not know my mother had been watching from the window. I did not know any of it until she told me 3 days ago." Viola came down the last step. "I have spent 3 days," Edmund said, "trying to determine whether a woman who was asked to perform love, and performed it so completely that she could no longer distinguish the performance from the truth, whether that is betrayal or the most honest thing I have ever been offered." "And?" she said. He looked at her. "I think," he said slowly, with the weight of everything he had held before it, "that I have been sealed shut for 3 years. I think you have been holding things together for 13. I think neither of us has had the luxury of arriving anywhere simply." He stopped. "I am asking whether you would be willing to begin again. Not from the morning room, not from the whisper, from this entrance hall, as we actually are." She said yes. It was not a complicated answer. She had been managing complicated answers for a long time, and this one was not complicated. That evening the fire in the library was lit, and they sat on opposite sides of the desk in the comfortable quiet of people who have said the necessary things and are now content to exist in the same room without filling it. The letter on Edmund's desk, the one the housekeeper had mentioned, the one that had been sitting unsealed for 3 days, lay where he had left it. He picked it up. He held it for a moment. Then he held it to the candle flame, and they watched it burn together, and he set the ash in the grate. Viola did not ask what it had said. He did not tell her. It was over, and some things are better left as what they were rather than what they said. Later, much later, when the clock on the mantel had moved past midnight and the house had gone quiet around them, he kissed her once, with the plainness that was his only register, when what he felt was real. No ceremony, no performance. Just the simple weight of a decision that had been long enough in coming. She had just finished telling him about the evening at Melfield. Not the version she had given in the entrance hall, but the longer version, the one with the particular quality of the light and the way she had watched him and then looked away. And he had listened to all of it without interrupting. And then he kissed her, and it was not complicated at all. The morning room at Ashcroft Park was quiet on the December morning that followed, in the particular way of rooms that have witnessed things and settled back into themselves. The pale winter light came through the tall windows and fell across two cups on one tray, set close together in the way that suggests a habit already forming, on the small writing desk near the window. The desk where Viola had first sat 10 weeks ago with her tea at the right temperature and the dowager's whispers still in the air. A letter lay open, begun in Viola's hand, addressed to Georgiana. She had written, "You were right that I deserved better than a pretense. You were wrong that it was a pretense. I did not know the difference at the time. I know it now." Below her signature, in a different hand, added without her knowledge, sometime before the household had risen, 3 words: "She never was."